Hello and good morning, everyone. Only Positivity here. I have my coffee with me, ready to kick off podcast number 20 on this playlist that I'm looking to launch called Elevated Thoughts. So, before diving into the book and everything for today, just let's start with the level set. As I endeavor upon pursuing knowledge and life experience, in this next phase of life through, fitness, traveling, photography, much more, one habit that I've really formed is reading. So this podcast essentially goes through some of the books that I've been reading as of late, taking those lessons learned and applying them to experiences in my life. Before diving into the book today, I guess let's start with a story. Today's story is a little bit more funny, a little bit more comical in nature. This story takes me back to when I first started my career coming out of college in public accounting. I started with one of the big four firms. For those of you that know what that is, or for those of you that don't know what it is, there's four main accounting firms, that do auditing and financial services for, majority of the business in America, right? I worked for one of those firms. So what happens is, since so many grads are coming in after college, they have orientations, right? And since they have a lot of capital, they've bought out this huge ranch in Texas, near Dallas, and it's like 500 acres, and it's a resort, right? There's so many activities, a lot of good food, a lot of different restaurants, but all owned by this big four firm, right? So, there's a lot of people in your starting class, right? Essentially, you have 40 to 50 people in your starting class, and you get close to them, right? You're spending the first, month or so with them until you get assigned to your respective clients. Amongst a host of things, the orientation encompasses you going to that resort in Texas for training for like 3 or 4 nights, right? So, um, one thing that is a general theme throughout my time in that Big Four area was drinking, right? There's always drinking woven into any kind of social engagement at any point in the day, right? That theme carried over to this facility, right? This resort. There was like a barn area, but it was really modern and nice inside, where you would congregate after your orientation for the day. And now, naturally, we gravitate towards the people we know, but there's people from all over the country, right? From San Francisco, New York, but we gravitate towards the people we know and see in orientation, right? So essentially, me and my orientation class, 10 or 15 people, we're all like, at the bar having drinks, we're chilling, we're laughing, right? And you can see there's this guy and this girl that were part of my class, and they're kind of feeling each other, right? And no worries, we're adults, right? Do your thing. We're at a resort, we're adults and everything like that. No, not too much micromanagement there. So whatever, do your thing, right? They're not making us feel uncomfortable. They're being a little touchy-feely, all good. The night ends, and we're all walking back to our respective rooms, right? It's one person per room. We all have individual rooms. I go to my room. Um, the next morning, I wake up, and before sessions start, they start early at 8. So I got up at like 6:30, get some breakfast. So as I'm walking to that barn area to get breakfast, I see the girl from last night who was kind of all up on that guy. She's getting into a cab in the drive, and she's leaving, right? And I'm like, is everything okay? Like, it's our first night here. Is it okay? I was worried that maybe something had happened, um, and she had to leave for that reason, right? So anyway, she didn't give me a reason. She just said, I gotta go, and left. And she looked hungover. I'm sure she was. I mean, I was too, right? And then she left. Okay. I also never saw that guy again either. Essentially, I go to breakfast, eat breakfast, get my coffee, and we go to our opening session for the day. Now, the proctor of this, or like, the guy who's like the handler and the guy who kicks off the sessions every day, um, he's speaking to like a group of like 3 or 400 people, right? We're in this auditorium looking thing now, and he's saying, we're all here to have fun. We're all here to have a good time. We're also here to learn. Um, and we operate on the assumption that you all are adults. And some people abuse these privileges, right? I'm like, oh shit, okay, like. Um, and he's like, we've had to send a couple people home for some obscene and inappropriate behavior, and I just encourage everyone to be on their best behavior, and utilize this experience as a privilege, right? And I'm like, oh, what happened? So then, one of my quote unquote mentors at the time was on the board of this whole training thing, right? And he was a really cool guy, had a very open, transparent candor with me. And then so we were getting lunch together that same day, right? Um, and then he seemed pretty frustrated about that situation in the morning, and I'm like, okay, he's like, some people are so stupid, man. Like, what the, and I'm like, what happened? He's like, um, he's like, and he's talking about the girl and the guy from last night that were, kind of up on each other. He's like, they went skinny dipping and were caught, kind of like making out in the fountain that's in the drive, right? Where everyone gets dropped off um, the previous night, right? So they were caught in there naked together. And I was like, oh my God. Like how, first of all, like how like messed up were you guys that you had to go do that, right? Like in the fountain, right? Like who okayed that idea? And secondly, are we not adults? Like, can you guys just like keep it in your pants for a little bit? Like, like no one's telling you not to do it, right? Like there's so many things you could do as opposed to that. But, you know, to me, it was more sad because we were all coming out of college, right? We were all working for 4 years to land a job at a big four firm, and in an instant, right? One lack of judgment, and boom, it's all over for you, right? And start your career off with a very, very negative tone. But yeah, I think it's funny. It's like to be honest, it's kind of sad, but like just a really weird story. Some people definitely aren't thinking long term with their actions, I guess. But anyway. So that's the story for today. And so let's come back to the book, right? So we're going through the book titled Mindful Relationship Habits, 25 Practices for Couples to Enhance Intimacy, Nurture Closeness, and Grow a Deeper Connection by S.J. Scott and Barrie Davenport. So we've been going through these 5 habits at a time, and today is going to be part 5. So we're done with the book after today. So, what I always start with this podcast off with in this book is, what's reassuring is like a lot of these habits, me and my fiance already are working on, but there's always room for improvement. And I think, that's the mentality I use as I go forward in life. Always try to be a student. So at the beginning of this book, for the previous 4 or 5 podcasts, we've been talking about how love and relationships is a great journey to embark upon, and that's why we're here today. So we'll dive straight into the first relationship habit for today, which is mindful relationship habit number 21. Learn how to apologize mindfully. So the first quote here that the author is going to is love means taking full responsibility for your actions and the impact they have on the one you love. So what that means to me is like don't take a back seat to your relationship, right? Don't let it happen to you. Take charge of it, right? You are in control of your relationship if you want to, right? Try not to be a victim. Try not to be someone that lets things happen to them. Take charge, and if you want to change something, if you want to do something, if you want to apologize, you can do it. So coming back to apologizing itself, right? Apologizing means doing something that's often difficult for us, which is getting past your ego. Um, and that pretty much means saying sorry and being vulnerable, right? Because when you apologize, you are admitting fault and you are expressing vulnerability. And that's a previous habit we talked about, and it's a good practice to really enhance your personality, enhance your qualities, just enhance you as a person. Being vulnerable is a way to enhance your confidence, just your overall life in general. So I think at the start, right, the book outlines at the start, just acknowledging that we've messed up in the first place is where everyone gets stuck. Um, so you know, the course correction is that if you have messed up somewhere, and we'll dive into like some of the ways to implement habits, but if you have messed up somewhere, it's okay, right? Take acceptance of it and admit it. It doesn't mean you're any less of a person. We all make mistakes, but if we don't admit them, we might not learn from them. And that's kind of cliche, but I believe it to be true. Um, So another quote, as soon as we admit to ourselves we've done something wrong, we feel diminished and we lose some amount of self-esteem, right? And it can the a mistake or messing up can sting, right? It can mean that you didn't do your best or you didn't attain the target that you set out to, but and we take a hit because of that, right? And I think that's the place where we can turn that upside down, kind of turn it positive, right? It does sting, but if we flip it to a positive perspective, we can really learn from that. Um, so talk about blaming others, right? In one of the previous habits, we talked about using I feel statements as opposed to pointing to your partner into a character flaw that they might have, right? And personally, using a personal example, I do this all the time, and sometimes I don't think it's fundamentally wrong, but it is, right? So what I'll say is like, okay, yeah, I messed up here, but remember when you did that? Um, and you know what? That doesn't help. But like to me in my mind, I'm like, okay, yeah, I fucked up today, but like, you've also done something. So I feel like you can understand like, where I'm coming from. And no need to like, get all crazy on me, right? But I should have just left it at the first half of that statement, right? Yep, I messed up. And that's it, right? Then move on. Because pointing blame is not going to help the situation by any means. And the book outlines that your goal is to offer an apology before your partner has to ask for one, right? Be aware of your actions. If you feel like you've done something wrong, reflect on it and apologize for it. There is no harm that comes from apologizing, right? It makes you a better person, makes you more humble, things like that. Um, and the book outlines like if you feel like you've done something wrong, you most likely have. And even if your partner hasn't called you out on that, you may have done something wrong. And it's okay. In my opinion, I think it's okay to apologize even if you don't know what it's for, as long as you don't do it sarcastically, right? Like if you know, if my fiance's upset, maybe it's not directly related to me, but maybe I'll apologize and say, I'm sorry if I've done anything wrong. Just let me know. Let's talk about it, right? So you start with like a peace offering, in my opinion. Um, Going forward off of that, like you don't want to take the blame when it's not yours, right? Um, but you could apologize for something that you may have done without knowing it, right? It just shows your willingness to put your ego aside to solve the issue, right? The best way to problem solve is to get on the same platform and not put one above another, right? Um, and the next quote really talks about or relates to what I was just saying, right? So even if you're not wrong, just acknowledge that your partner's in pain, right? Acknowledge that you might have hurt them and that wasn't your intention, right? Sometimes when we directly communicate with people, it can hurt their feelings. And you don't have to apologize for being direct if you weren't rude, but you could apologize and be like, hey, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. That wasn't my intention. I'm just trying to be direct, right? That way, you know, even though your partner shouldn't assume it, they know that you don't have any malintent behind like what you're saying. Um, so going forth, right? It's all about the being genuine, right? Being genuine in the way you communicate and showing humility and real sorrow for your actions, right? And what that means to me is like we're all growing, we're all evolving all the time. We're gonna make mistakes, at all points in life, and we shouldn't be hurt by them, really, if we take them as opportunities to, optimize, opportunities to advance. Um, and like when you are apologizing, the book will outline take complete ownership for your actions. Don't share it with anyone else, right? Be like, you know what? I should have known better, right? No, no, it's not anyone else. Don't put your blame on anyone else because that's not fair, right? Um, how many how many like let's talk about guy friends, right? Like a lot of times we take hits for each other, right? We throw each other on the bus maybe potentially, right? Because we don't want the girl to get mad or something like that. You see that happen a lot with friend groups, and that's okay, right? Like I'm here for all my best friends, right? I can take those hits and things like that, but taking full ownership of your blunders in full, right? Um, really enhances you as a person. And also, when you do apologize, the book will outline to offer it unconditionally. All right. So like if your partner doesn't apologize, that's okay, right? Don't apologize with that idea of reciprocity in mind that you're gonna get it back. And then lastly, right, just tying it all up is go further than an apology, right? An apology is the first step. Go further than that and change your behavior, right? And I think that just speaks to the fact that actions speak louder than words. So, um, that was mindful relationship habit number 21. Learn how to apologize mindfully. Okay, so the next habit is a little interesting, but let's just go straight into it. So, mindful relationship habit number 22, spice up your sex life. Take a sip of coffee real quick. Um, so yeah, mindful relationship habit number 22, spice up your sex life. So, I'm gonna let you guys read the book and figure out the best way to enhance, your sexual intimacy, because that's very personal. But I'm gonna be literal here, okay? So let's see if this works. So, we're talking about spicing up your sex life, right? So I am a huge spice guy in the literal sense, okay? You look at my spice rack, and there are all types of spices, okay? I know what my favorite spices are, but from time to time, I'll try different combinations and different concoctions, right? I got salt, I got pepper, I got elote seasoning, I got mushroom seasoning, I got onion and salt seasoning, I got taco seasoning, chili and lime seasoning. I got so many spices, guys. And so, the main way I use those spices are on my turkey burgers, right? So every day I eat turkey, right? Somehow. And the reason I don't get sick of it is because I change it up all the time. I spice it up all the time. Sometimes I chop them up. Sometimes I put them with spinach. Sometimes I'll put them between two whole wheat buns. Sometimes I ground up the turkey, and I'll make like taco meat, and eat them with like brown rice or quinoa. So the point of it is I switch it up so I don't get sick of it. Super literal, but I think it applies. So I'm gonna leave that there. Mindful relationship habit number 22, spice up your sex life. So going forward, into mindful relationship habit number 23, practice playfulness. I think this is one of the most important habits, right? And let's go into why that is. So, some level set. So the book will say that playfulness is in part an openness to being a fool, which is a combination of not worrying about competence, not being self-important, not taking norms as sacred, and finding ambiguity and double edges as a source of wisdom and delight. Now, um, I think personally, right, playfulness is it coincides with being vulnerable, right? Like we talk about. Um, thrive when you're being vulnerable, right? Thrive in a situation where you might, look a little stupid, right? Um, do things that you wouldn't normally do. Put yourself in situations that, like I said, um, you might not be able to take control of fully, right? Um, so, one thing I'll say, weird story, really weird story. So, last year I went to the East Coast, and one of my buddies was proposing to his fiance, right? And so he was proposing, and then we were all gonna meet up at this rooftop bar, downtown in Midtown. So, um, we we get there, right? Me and my buddies get there, and we're waiting for my buddy who just proposed to come with his fiance, right? So I get there, and there's a bunch of people I don't know there, right? Because like the fiance side people are there too. So I get there, and we get there like pretty much right before my buddy and his fiance are gonna get there. So people are waiting, and it kind of looks like they're waiting for us. So essentially, what I do is when I get there, I thought they were taking a picture. I thought they were taking a selfie. So I thought they were saying like, "Get in here, take a selfie," right? So I go in and I start smiling like someone's taking a selfie, and they're like, "Dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, no one has a camera out." So essentially, I'm like posing for a picture, but no one's taking a picture. Now, I felt super stupid, but like, everyone had a good laugh about it, right? Everyone had a good laugh about it, and I was like, oh shit, well, whatever, I'm stupid, I guess. Like, just laughing at myself. In a weird situation, right? Like it was funny, and to even now we still talk about that moment, right? It's funny times, right? It's a really innocent interaction, but funny, okay? Um, and let's go back to relationships, right? When you first meet, you have that euphoria. Like you're in that honeymoon phase, right? And you're kind of not silly to be. You're not caring about being silly and carefree. Okay. But as time goes on, you become a little bit more serious, and the complications of adult life they come at you hard, and they can really dwindle that playful mindset that you guys could have, right? The seriousness of life can really take over, and oftentimes it can make seem that like fun is something that we should regret, or like we should feel bad for having fun, right? Like we see that with a lot of immigrant parents, right? That they wouldn't spend money on like a gym membership really, or they wouldn't spend money on like I don't know, like going on too many fancy dinners, or they wouldn't spend money on self-care and things like that, or too much traveling because they think it's indulging, right? Um, but let's talk about even the day-to-day stuff, right? Like, as me and my fiance come together, you got to think about maybe visiting both sides of parents now, getting married, kids, a house, all of that can take away from playfulness, right? And personally, it's like I never want to lose that childlike tendency of like being creative or just having time to sit around and mess around and be silly, right? And I personally don't feel a need to busy myself with more things, right? I think nowadays, you know, having alone time, having time where you don't have any obligations is almost seen as negative, or we're worried about the thoughts we get into when we just sit still for a little bit, right? And I think it's always okay to really just be silly, be goofy. It's okay. It keeps you young, it keeps you youthful, and keeps you on your toes. So I'm gonna hop off that. But really try to make playfulness a habit. It's a skill, right? And you have to make time for it in your lives, because I think personally, my playfulness has helped me relate to my younger cousins, right? Like, I think I'm really close with my younger cousins, mainly because, we're playful in the same way, right? Like, I don't come across as this old dude who knows everything, right? And is like a mentor. No, like I'm learning in life just like you're learning in life. If I can learn from you just like you can learn from me, right? I have some further life experience, and if you want to know about it, I can tell you. But I don't want to put myself above anyone else. Keep myself vulnerable and playful. Um, so um, they talk about ways to be silly, right? And one of them is like they say turn on some music while you clean, and enjoy, right? And I think that's a good one, right? I think me and my fiance sometimes make up entire dance routines, um, or sometimes we talk in this like this weird language that isn't like real, right? It's like a combination of like um, Malayalam, like a South Indian language, and like Gujarati, which is like more of a North Indian language. Um, Not a language by any means, but I don't know, we created it. I think we can understand each other. Um, but have you guys, so question, have you guys ever seen those memes of Arthur, right? Arthur and DW, that cartoon show. Um, so there's all these memes with Arthur with headphones on, right? And the headphones are on the side of his head, but his ears are on top of his head. So that makes no sense, right? So what happens is what I'll do is I'll take a set of headphones and put them on top of my head, right? Like where because my ears aren't there, right? They're on the side. So I'll come out and I'll tell her that I have arthritis, right? Super nerdy, but like I don't know, like kind of funny, just trying to be playful about it, right? And that's like kind of an inside joke between us, right? Like, oh, I got arthritis. But like I said, try to make new jokes, man. Like they could be lame, they could be funny, but as long as you're trying to be playful, I think it's like it's that activity, right? It's the idea that you're putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, that will really be novel. So that was mindful relationship habit number 23, practice playfulness. And then we move on to mindful relationship habit number 24, disconnect from digital devices. So the book goes into an example of a couple that you see in a restaurant that like instead of engaging or talking, they have their heads down and they're like flipping through apps or like taking pictures of their food on social media, right? Um, and with our phones being like always in hand, like or always a reach away, it connects us to this like imaginary world that we can potentially think is more interesting than like the present that we're actually living in. Okay, so the book will say that we can replace real life interactions with virtual experiences. And that can lead to not being able to connect to your present environment, right? We see that a lot these days especially with COVID now, the ease of access with technology and connecting with people can make the physical environment very impersonal. Um, and we start to become obsessed with how our lives look through that digital lens. Um, and I personally believe that, excessive phone usage can really wedge a barrier between couples. It can make your communication like impersonal and shallow. Like, oh, did you see this most recent issue like on Facebook? Like, and you only talk about that. Don't talk about anything deeper, right? No deeper conversation about values, life direction and things like that. And it's okay to talk about those things. Like, don't get me wrong, I do it all the time. But you want to have like quality touch points at a frequent cadence. Um, and then the book will say bonding and intimacy will become too much of a task as opposed to that instant gratification you can get through likes on social media or something like that, right? Um, Nowadays with social media, like you can get that gratification very, very quickly through a like or through a reposting of something or a follower, right? And we can often take those people as like loyal to us, maybe more so than our significant other, right? And that's if that's the case, that's sad, but it shouldn't be the case, right? Um, let's talk about a personal example. Like, have you ever tried to have a conversation with someone who is on their phone, right? And that's the most frustrating thing because, they're kind of half there. They're like nodding. They're like, yeah, but they're also not, right? No matter who you are, you could be the most skillful texter. It's going to be hard for you to really be engaged if you're texting someone, right? Um, so what I will say, like, I'm being kind of negative about it, right? But me and my fiance live together, so it's okay. Like, we sit on the couch and we're on our phones a lot, like, but but we have meaningful touch points often, right? We put the phone down, we turn the TV off, we'll sit in color, and then we talk about things, right? I make sure that like, or we make sure that our touch points are quality and we are like getting deeper into each other's minds as opposed to just talking about the newest issue like on Facebook or Instagram or what have you, right? So that was mindful relationship habit number 24, disconnect from digital devices. So we go into the last habit in the book, which I think is the most important. Mindful relationship habit number 25, learn to love yourself. So, first quote, your ability to be present and mindfully loving to your partner is rooted in your ability to love yourself. A couple more quotes. If you can't accept yourself, you'll have a hard time accepting your partner. If you can't forgive yourself, you'll have a hard time forgiving your partner. If you can't be empathetic with yourself, you'll have a hard time showing compassion to your partner. So here's what I take away from that. So, love from your partner is not gonna make you whole, right? A lot of people are looking for, their better half or that, they're missing something, right? That a relationship can bring, and it certainly can, right? I guarantee you, like, but it you first have to be whole, right? And it's okay for you to work on it together, right? But but two whole people coming together sets a good foundation, right? Um, and you can't rely on that other person to make you whole because they're working on themselves as well. So uplift each other, right? Support each other in becoming whole, right? Together. Um, and one thing I'll say, coming back to my life here, so I hang out with a certain group of friends like every single Friday, right? That's my thing. Like I don't move that. Um, and my fiance doesn't come to those, that engage. It's like it's a boys hangout, right? And I could see her. She's never really done this, but I could see her, and I could see a lot of people saying, you're leaving me all alone on a Friday night. Um, what like you don't love me or whatever, right? Like I could see that happening. Okay, but what I say to that is, right, if it does occur, is that um, you know, hanging out with my friends is just part of what makes me whole, right? No matter what it is, I go on Friday nights, I unwind, I de-stress, I play board games, I play some chess, play some video games, and it's part of what makes me whole, right? Um, and before we met, me and my fiance, that's what I did, right? And that's in my normal routine. So, what I say to that is it makes me better, right? It makes me a better person, it makes me a better individual for the relationship as well. So that's an interesting one, right? Is we can try to compromise, right? For some of the people we love, especially our significant other. But it's important to really recognize the things that make you better, or that serve for de-stress or serve for unwinding, And make those part of your routine, man. Don't feel bad for those things if it's not truly a bad thing. But that's aside. So um, acknowledge your strengths, but also be aware of your weaknesses, right? And the book says you have to do this without seeing yourself as flawed. So, the way I position that is always be a student of the world, right? Um, always be willing to learn, always be willing to take criticism in any form and take something from it, right? So I'll be brutally honest about myself, right? So as I'm reading, right, I naturally want to talk about them. I naturally want to try out the things that I'm reading about, right? With this book, with some of the books that we're going to go through, some of the books that we have gone through, right? Four agreements, trying to implement those, trying to implement some of these relationship habits, right? As I'm actively talking about it, I personally know that I can come off cocky. Maybe I can come off like I know it all, right? Like, oh, I'm this enlightened guy, right? But you know what? I've been gaining a lot of knowledge, and sometimes if I see an issue, I can try to insert myself with my friends, my family, my fiance, and say, hey, look, why don't you try this? Maybe it'll help you out, right? And it truly comes from a loving place. But I got to be aware of being this douchey guy, right? That's like, like the Pope giving everyone advice, right? I want to be relatable. I want to offer my opinion when asked. You know what I mean? So it's me constantly evolving, right? Even though in this previous phase, it was like, all right, you got to form some habits around like good things, like working out, reading, stretching, right? Things like that. Form the habits, but there's a whole nother conundrum when you talk about, okay, now that I've formed them and I'm potentially getting some momentum from them, how do I behave now, right? So constantly acknowledging my strengths, right? My commitment, my conviction, but also knowing that I have areas for improvement, but that doesn't mean I'm flawed overall as an individual. And going to our next point, that really comes from me embracing who I am. Knowing where I came from, where I'm at now, and potentially where I'm going. There's always going to be certain things that people aren't going to like, about what I do, right? They might not like the weed side of what I do, or maybe some of the things I say, right? Um, but those the people who will love you unconditionally or are always going to accept you, right? So like the people who are your best friends, the people who you consider your family, they should accept you unconditionally, as long as you are, trending in a positive direction, right? Um, and with that, I can do anything, right? With that support from my best friends, from my fiance, I feel like I can do anything. We go forward to the next point, taking time to be alone, reconnect, and reflect. And this is a really important one, personally. So we tend to try to busy ourselves with things, and we talked about that earlier, different obligations. Um, and we can be afraid of taking a second and actually removing that like constant static of life, right? You get up, you go to work, you might have to drop your kids off at daycare, you're at work, email traffic all day long. You got to get out of work, pick your kids up, maybe work out, maybe go see your parents. By the time all that's done is 9:30, 10:30 p.m., you go to sleep. Do it all over tomorrow, right? But like, what if you took out some of those activities and just sat and thought about life and where you want to go with it for a little bit, right? Or you think about your beliefs a little bit further. Um, just because you believed in something at one point doesn't mean you have to believe in that forever, right? I grew up very traditionally Hindu, going to the temple very often. There's certain things I agree with the way I grew up, some things I don't, and I've changed my value set as I've gotten older. Um, so it's okay to do that, right? But like as long as you think about your beliefs and you reevaluate them, and if you still believe in it, sure, but at least you did that, right? Um, so talking about how we suppress our feelings, right? So sometimes when there's conflict, or just like build up of tension from all these activities, we suppress our feelings, and we can really express them in some unproductive ways, like dysfunction, passive aggressive behavior, eating, alcohol, things like that. Um, but you want to explore yourself, right? Keep diving deeper and deeper into who you are and like let your light shine and constantly find new things about yourself that you didn't know before, right? Be interested in how your mind can be one of your most powerful assets if you train it, right? Similar to the way you train your body. Your mind can be something extremely powerful. And be firm in what you believe in, right? And that's the book will outline. But you have to identify what you do believe in first, right? Like I said, reevaluate your values and principles at a frequent cadence. And I personally believe in my lifestyle, right? I believe in all the things I do, and all the in reading, the yoga stuff I do, the habits I form, the traveling, things like that, the photography. I believe in all of that. It makes me a better person. It challenges me to grow, and I personally feel like I'm getting better at it, right? I personally feel like I'm getting better at podcasting in general too. Um, and you know, my two big ones I would say are fitness and traveling, and they both do wonders for you. Okay, and so when I think about that, think about spending money on, fitness on, $150 a month on an Orange Theory membership, or, going on $1,000 trip somewhere. You know, that could be seen as something like, frivolous, right? Like I'm just careless with my money. But you know what? Like those are two things that are investing in myself. Um, and I have no problem with it, right? Stand by that. Also, I think a really good one is evaluate the ways you are living inauthentically. Okay, so in what ways are you living for yourself, and in what ways are you living for others? That's what that means to me. Are you trying to meet expectations of someone? It could be your parents, friend groups, whatever. It could be, your religious setting. Are you trying to meet someone's expectations? And if so, what are those expectations? And are they really important to you? Okay, um, is going to the temple, 5 times a week really something that's important to me, or is that maybe an expectation that was set on me, or things like that. Um, Talking about respecting your elders, right? So so I believe this to my core, right? Elders are great people, and they have a lot to share, right? But I'm not going to submit to an elder just because they are an elder, right? If they're being an asshole, I'm an adult at this point, right? And you can't treat me certain ways, and take things for granted, right? We're still able to evolve, and so I remove myself from those situations where you have to be submissive to someone just because they're older than you, right? Um, and also, I think it's a very tough practice, but we always have to try, I believe, to be objective. Okay? Um, it's always difficult to look at yourself through a fresh set of eyes, right? Because we are so close, to our day to day, and we have our own opinions on them. Um, so what I do in that case is, I drive. I go for some long drives. Sometimes just for leisure, right? I'll drive to the city and drive back with my fiance. Or my parents live far away, so I drive to them. It's about 45, 50 minutes away. So if I'm ever by myself, right, or if I'm with my fiance, I'm talking. I'm speaking about the things that happen. That's my time to reflect. So if I'm by myself, I'm talking to myself, right? I'm going through my interactions. I'm going through the positives and the negatives, and I'm basically doing that postmortem on all my interactions, how I could have improved it, trying to be as objective as possible. And on many occasions, I'll throw a lot of blame on myself, right? I'll be more critical of myself, and say, hey, look, you could have done that better. You could have taken control in that situation. That was on you. You could have guided that interaction a little bit better. Um, and I try to be grateful for what I have and what I don't have, and that's what the book will go into. It's um, it's difficult to think that everything happens for a reason, and that's what I believe, right? And Viktor Frankl goes into this statement, right, in Man's Search for Meaning, about being worthy of your struggle. So for those things you don't have, or for whatever struggle you have, it can be easy to really feel like life's getting us down, but I think we should all try and be worthy of every moment that comes our way, good or bad. Um, and you know what? You gotta accept things, in this world, right? You gotta accept things that you cannot change. Um, it's hard to worry about things that are outside of your locus of control. Why worry about it, right? There's an example that someone once sent to me, like, so let's say if someone's gonna rob you, if someone is planning to rob you, there's pretty much nothing you can do about that, right? Uh, because it's a planned attack, right? This can open up a bigger debate. But what you want to do is avoid things like, maybe leaving your garage door open or leaving your door unlocked. Because what that means is, not that you're asking to be robbed, but you're not doing everything in your control to protect yourself from being robbed. I hope that's a good example, but it's just you want anything in your control, worry about it, right? If you want to worry about it, but things out of it, just leave it. Um, then going forward to the people you put yourself around. If you're surrounded by judgmental or critical people, this is gonna, kind of put you down there in terms of your self-worth. You got to remove toxic people from your life, no matter who they are, right? we have three options. We can either accept the situation, we can change it, or we can remove it, right? So you always have those three options in any situations. But I always choose to remove toxic people from my life, or at least try to turn that positive. And you want to find supporting people, right? Supporting friends who are caring, fun, and happy, right? You support each other no matter what in positive activities, right? So, like, let's talk about right now. So, right now, we probably see an abundance of podcasts being put out, an abundance of Instagram pages being created because people are at home, right? They're getting bored, they want to do something. So, what I say to that is, if your friends are being positive, they're doing positive things, support them. Why not, right? Don't worry about the likes that you get. Just do things because it's positive to do, right? It makes this world a better place. Um, you want to let go of people who look at life like glass half empty, who are very cynical, right? Or they try to manipulate you. And this can be true with your family, right? Friends and family. And then lastly, rely on yourself for approval and be your own best friend. If in your mind you are doing something great, you are doing something even maybe not so great, make sure you vet it through yourself, right? Be your own best friend. Talk to yourself, reason things through, objectively look at yourself, and try to be your best, right? Through that lens. But you know what? That's all I had for you guys today. I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. We're done with this book, and we're going to move on to a different flavor of book that'll hopefully be a good read as well. But that's all I got for you guys today. Feel free to leave me any feedback, and remember, only positivity. Thanks, guys.